Hello, my name is Nancy, and at the age of 29, I am ambitiously pursuing my career goals. Currently, I live with my husband Benjamin. Recently, I've been thinking seriously about the possibility of starting a family. However, Benjamin feels that we should prioritize building and settling into a new home before we consider having children. Consequently, we are both working hard to save up for our future residence. Even though I would love to start our family sooner rather than later, Benjamin's firm stance on this matter becomes clear every time we discuss the possibility of children. He consistently emphasizes the importance of establishing our home first, which I find disheartening as it often feels like he dismisses my feelings. It seems I have no choice but to push myself even harder to contribute more to our savings. We have been married for a year, and I have begun to recognize a recurring theme in our relationship. Benjamin seldom takes my viewpoints into account, a habit that has continued from our dating days. While I once admired his decisiveness, I now realize that mutual respect for opinions is crucial in a marriage. I am increasingly concerned about the stability of our relationship, especially given the influence of his parents who live nearby. Benjamin often visits his parents under the pretext of saving money. However, I've noticed that he frequently spends time with his colleagues enjoying drinks and not factoring these outings into a strict budget. It baffles me how he holds me to rigorous saving standards while allowing himself certain liberties. His frugality even reaches into minor details, such as conserving hot water and turning off lights prematurely, rules that he seems to apply only to me. Our relationship feels increasingly lopsided. Although I am deeply frustrated, he seems to think it's reasonable to enforce his way of thinking on others. Whenever we visit his parents, tensions rise. It's been a year since you two got married. We'd love some good news soon, my in-laws often exclaim, eager to meet their grandchild. At these moments, I catch Benjamin giving a disapproving look, silently signaling them to avoid unnecessary comments. As these pressures mount, I find myself at a crossroads, questioning how we can find a balance that respects both our dreams and the practical aspects of our lives together. While Benjamin and I both yearn for a child, he insists that we should build our own home before expanding our family. It's quite unfair how my in-laws pressure me about having a baby rather than speaking to Benjamin, who seems indifferent to my feelings about the timing, I think to myself. Despite my urge to speak out, I often find myself muted by their relentless expectations for a grandchild. After dinner, Benjamin walks out for a smoke and remarks, "Nancy, you're working hard, but if you really want to be a housewife, you should consider quitting your job and focusing on home life. Maybe that's why you're not getting the attention you need from Benjamin." It's as if he's implying that my career is the reason we can't start a family, which is unfair and untrue. Benjamin himself isn't ready to have children anytime soon. Frustrated, I respond sharply to my in-law. Benjamin was the one who encouraged me to keep working. Why don't you talk to him before you lecture me again? My patience wears thin as I continue. I want children too, but Benjamin is the one who's not ready. Please direct your concerns to him instead of constantly criticizing me. My words seem to shock my in-laws. I excuse myself from the table and head towards the door, my frustration boiling. Benjamin, casually smoking by the entrance, doesn't say a word. As I get into the car, a friend who had joined us for dinner follows and casually remarks, "Are you leaving already?" She's unaware of the tension. Exhausted by the recurring pressures from my in-laws and Benjamin's indifference, I finally declare that I won't be visiting the in-laws' home anymore. Benjamin looks at me surprised and argues, "Why not? We can save on food costs, right? Besides, you want a home and kids soon, don't you?" Fed up, I snapped. "If it's really about saving, then maybe you should cut back on your drinking and smoking rather than driving to your parents just to save the cost of a meal. Why can't you make savings in those ways too?" Everyone needs a break. I voiced my frustration. Benjamin had always imposed restrictions on me, like avoiding the use of hot water and mandating lights off by 9 p.m. Under the guise of saving money, he seemed to think that making these changes wouldn't require any real sacrifices. If I'm the only one making these adjustments, then I don't even want this house. I'm so tired of it. You never give up anything yourself, but you're perfectly fine demanding sacrifices from others, I protested. Benjamin tried to brush off my concerns, suggesting they weren't significant, but I firmly countered, no, it is a big deal. Do you realize how much patience I've had to muster all this time? His ongoing pretense in front of his parents, acting as though I was the reason we couldn't have grandchildren, infuriated me further. I'm tired of being pressured about grandchildren. It's not me who's hesitant about having children, it's Benjamin. I've been clear about wanting them soon, so please stop this constant pressure, I continued, my voice steeped in exasperation. Seeing Benjamin struggle to respond to my uncharacteristic outburst brought a bitter sense of satisfaction, but it didn't solve our underlying issues. Feeling uncertain about what to do next, I just stared out of the car window, ignoring Benjamin. A turning point came a month later when a relative of mine, my father's brother, passed away. He left behind several pieces of land and a luxurious mansion and lived a lavish lifestyle. Benjamin's eyes widened when he learned of my uncle's impressive estate. I didn't realize you had such a remarkable relative, he commented. A few days after hearing about my inheritance, I decided to discuss the inheritance details with a lawyer in our apartment, knowing the matter was exclusively mine and seeing Benjamin's discomfort with the idea of inheritance. I politely asked him to step out of the room to avoid any potential complications his presence might cause. After about 5 hours of detailed explanation from the lawyer, I thanked him and saw him out. Surprisingly, when I turned around, Benjamin was not in the apartment. Assuming he had stepped out to give us privacy, I began preparing dinner, unaware of the changes that lay ahead. 4 months later, Benjamin would come to me with an unexpected confession. Benjamin's unexpected invitation for a drive filled me with a mix of excitement and curiosity. As we drove into a residential area, my curiosity turned to confusion when we stopped in front of a house unfamiliar to me. Benjamin pressed the intercom, and to my surprise, my in-laws stepped out, not from their usual home, but from this new one. My father-in-law beamed, exclaiming, "You finally made it. So, when are you and Nancy moving in?" "We're thinking of moving in by the end of this month." His next words were less welcoming. He accused me of being a selfish daughter-in-law and of shifting the responsibility of having children onto Benjamin. I shot Benjamin a disapproving look, bewildered as to why he would bring me here when I had made it clear that I didn't want to visit my in-laws anymore, seeking clarity. I asked Benjamin for an explanation. He responded almost too calmly, "Don't be so upset. If we live together, it can help mend the relationship between you and my mom. Besides, this will be our new home from now on, so you should be more cooperative about the children's issues." His revelation stunned me. I had expressly stated I didn't want to live with them, yet here he was announcing plans that were already set in motion without my agreement. The house, as Benjamin explained, was a 2-family residence. My plan was always for us to eventually live with my parents, so what's the problem with living in a 2-family house now? He asked, as if the arrangement should have been obvious. As I mulled over the situation, the implications of living in such a house became clear, especially in light of our finances. Constructing such a grand house seemed beyond our means, and I couldn't understand how Benjamin managed it. My dad and I chipped in the money, so our savings are empty. But that's fine, right? Benjamin said nonchalantly, revealing a complete disregard for our mutual financial planning. He then added, "I heard your uncle's inheritance was about $720,000, so if you use that money to repay us for the cost of this 2-family house, it should all work out, huh?" His assumption that my inheritance would simply be used to cover these expenses without my consent left me astounded. The audacity of his plan, assuming I would finance these arrangements unilaterally, was not only presumptive but deeply unsettling. Frustrated with the entire ordeal, Benjamin delved into his bag and pulled out a pre-filled divorce form with his name already scribbled on it. "Your money is our money. If you don't like living together, let's just get a divorce," he declared confidently, handing me the form. Resolutely, I replied, "Fine. If those are the only options, then divorce is the better choice for me." I slipped the divorce form into my bag, turned my back on him and my stunned in-laws, and walked away without heeding their reactions. As I walked out, I mentioned offhandedly, "By the way, I renounced my uncle's inheritance." Benjamin stood frozen, his face etched with confusion. Without waiting for any response, I caught a bus and returned to our apartment. Once home, I filled in my name on the divorce form that already bore Benjamin's, finalized it, and promptly submitted the divorce papers. Then I went to a home improvement store, bought several cardboard boxes, and started preparing for my move. Recognizing I couldn't manage the move alone, I hired a moving company. Luckily, it was a slow season for moves, allowing for a quick relocation. As I packed, I heard Benjamin arrive at the door. I had the chain lock on and called out, "Sorry I had the chain on. I'm not sure what you might do in your current state of anger. Besides, I need to finish packing. Could you stay at your parents' house for a few days?" Defiantly, Benjamin said, "I won't accept a divorce." His statement surprised me. I reminded him, "But you handed me the divorce form, didn't you? If you sign the divorce papers, that means you agree to the divorce." He looked puzzled and frustrated, quickly changing the subject. "Why would you give up on a $720,000 inheritance? Normally you'd inherit it," he questioned, clearly having caught bits of information about the inheritance, but misunderstanding the situation. It seemed he had overheard some details about the $720,000 inheritance and in a rush had gone to my in-laws. They in turn impulsively bought the two-family house without considering the full implications. I clarified, "The inheritance discussion was mine to handle, and renouncing it was my decision made to avoid exactly these kinds of entanglements and presumptions. Given the complexity of my uncle's estate, renouncing the inheritance seemed the wisest choice. Though he had $720,000, the costs associated with his assets were enormous. His mansion required demolition, the land demanded significant upkeep, and he had accrued substantial debts. Despite having 2 sons, 2 daughters, a wife, and grandchildren, all had chosen to renounce their claims, leaving the inheritance to me." When I explained this to Benjamin, he was incredulous. "No way. So you're saying that even with $720,000, there wouldn't have been much left? That sounds like fraud," he exclaimed. I clarified that after a thorough discussion with the lawyer, it became clear that the inheritance was more of a burden than a boon. Unfortunately, someone had eavesdropped on part of this conversation and misunderstood the full context. My explanation left Benjamin speechless, and it seemed he finally realized his mistake. However, I firmly told him, "It's too late now. You betrayed my trust. We've already filed for divorce, and you and I are no longer a couple." "Why are you now hinting that you don't want the divorce?" I asked. "If you truly didn't want to separate, you should have followed me immediately when I returned." I reminded him of the consequences of his and his father's decisions, particularly their investment in the two-family house, without considering all the facts. I pointed out that his mother's opinion on the divorce didn't alter the reality of our situation. Her lack of experience with financial matters might have prevented her from understanding the true value of money. With a heavy sigh, I realized that entertaining complaints about his parents was no longer my concern. If we were still married, perhaps I might have listened and discussed these issues, but under the current circumstances, it was no longer appropriate for me to engage in such conversations. However, I reminded him, "You haven't submitted the divorce papers yet, have you?" He pleaded desperately, "If you do it now, we can still be a couple. Please, let's live together in that two-family house." But I had already submitted the divorce papers, so there was no turning back. "It's pointless now," I replied firmly. His face fell, a picture of bewilderment and loss, as he stood at the apartment door. While I believed he had brought this situation upon himself, I couldn't let him linger outside indefinitely. After briefly considering sending him away, I realized I had no time to waste and continued my preparations for moving. Eventually he left, and I proceeded with my plans. I notified my workplace about the divorce, given that my boss had acted as our mediator. Feeling a need to explain the situation, I also shared the news with my coworkers during lunch break. These were the same people who had celebrated with us at our wedding. Unexpectedly, Benjamin burst into my department while I was discussing this with my colleagues, exclaiming, "It's absurd that you're talking about the divorce. I wish you hadn't mentioned it." He then proceeded to explain to everyone that he had assumed I had inherited a significant estate, which led to his impulsive suggestion of buying the two-family house. Faced with the choice between divorce and living together, I chose divorce. As a result, Benjamin found himself increasingly ostracized at work, even as my colleagues extended their sympathy towards me. The situation at his job grew so uncomfortable that he eventually resigned. During this turbulent time, a male colleague approached me. He confessed, "I've actually liked you for a long time. I hope to build a home where we can communicate as a couple and work things out together." This unexpected confession offered a glimpse of a potentially different and more understanding partnership in the future.
"You don't deserve this house," Emma, Michael sneered, tossing the property papers onto our kitchen counter. "I've transferred it to Lisa. She'll make better use of it than you ever did." I stared at my husband of 12 years, my hands gripping the edge of the marble counter we picked out together. The same counter where we'd shared countless morning coffees, where we planned our future. Now it felt like ice under my fingers. "You did what?" My voice was surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. Michael's smirk widened as he lounged against the doorframe, his expensive new watch glinting in the afternoon light. "You heard me. I transferred our house to my sister for $1. Completely legal. Lisa's always loved this place, and unlike you, she knows how to maintain a proper home." I glanced at the security panel near the kitchen door, its tiny red light blinking steadily. Michael had no idea that 3 months ago, I'd installed a comprehensive security system throughout our home. Not just cameras, but audio recording too. A decision that seemed paranoid then, but proved prophetic now. "When did you do this?" I asked, buying time as I remembered the footage I'd reviewed just this morning. The late-night meeting between Michael and Lisa 2 nights ago, their whispered conversation in our living room when they thought I was asleep. "Does it matter?" He waved his hand dismissively. "The papers are signed. You have 30 days to move out. Lisa's already planning her renovations." I thought about the hidden camera footage stored safely in my cloud account. The video showing Michael and Lisa huddled over these same papers, his slurred voice revealing their real plan. "Lisa, once Emma's gone, we'll sell this place and split the profits. That'll show her what happens when she questions my spending." "You really think you can just throw me out of my own home?" I kept my voice level, remembering the legal consultation I had last week. Another paranoid decision that now seemed like divine intervention. Michael's face darkened. "Your home? I paid for this house. My money, my decision. You're just the decoration I'm tired of looking at." I almost laughed at the irony. He had no idea about the trust fund my grandmother had left me, the one that had actually provided the down payment for this house. I let him believe he paid for everything because that's what he needed to feel powerful. Another mistake I was done making. "Fine," I said, gathering my purse. "I'll start packing." Michael blinked, clearly thrown by my calm acceptance. "That's it? No crying? No begging? Would it change anything if I did?" He shifted uncomfortably, probably remembering all the times my tears had made him feel guilty enough to back down. No, it wouldn't. Lisa deserves this place more than you ever did. She's family. I headed for the door, pausing only to check my phone. The security app showed the system was still recording, capturing every word of this conversation. You're right about one thing, Michael. Family deserves this house. He followed me to the door, probably expecting me to break down at any moment. Where are you going? To see my lawyer, I replied honestly. Someone should review those transfer papers, don't you think? His laugh followed me out the door. Waste of time. Everything's legal. I got into my car, my hands steady as I started the engine. Through the rearview mirror, I watched Michael pull out his phone, probably to call Lisa and gloat about how easily I'd given up. He had no idea what was coming. The footage from 2 nights ago played in my mind. Michael, drunk on expensive scotch, revealing to Lisa how he'd been embezzling from his company to fund his gambling habit. Lisa, eager to help him hide his tracks by using this house sale as a cover, both of them, caught on camera, planning to defraud not just me but Michael's company too. I pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer's number. Sarah, it's Emma. Remember that footage I showed you last week? I think it's time to use it. Yes, he did exactly what we expected. No, he has no idea about the cameras. As I drove toward the lawyer's office, I thought about the home Michael was so eager to take from me, the house my grandmother's money had bought, the home I poured my heart into for 12 years. Michael thought he was punishing me, but he'd just given me exactly what I needed, proof of his crimes. The paperwork is ready, Sarah said through the car's speakers. Once we show the evidence to the DA, your husband's going to have a lot more to worry about than property transfer. I ended the call, a small smile playing on my lips. Michael always said I was too quiet, too passive. He was about to learn that quiet doesn't mean weak, and some people are smart enough to gather evidence before making their move. The security camera footage would show more than just his fraudulent property transfer. It would reveal months of late-night conversations about embezzled money, plans to hide assets, and now clear evidence of attempted fraud. Michael and Lisa thought they were so clever, but they never once looked up at the tiny cameras capturing their every word. I parked outside Sarah's office building, taking a moment to check my phone. 3 missed calls from Michael already. He was probably starting to wonder why I'd left so calmly. Soon enough, he'd understand that sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous. This house battle was about to become much more than Michael bargained for, and I had everything I needed to make sure justice was served. He wanted to talk about family. He was about to learn what happens when you betrayed the wrong person. The next morning, I sat in Sarah's office, watching Michael's face turn ashen as he viewed the security footage on her laptop. His sister Lisa sat beside him, her usual smug expression crumbling with each passing minute of the video. Turn it off, Michael snapped, but Sarah let it play. I particularly like the part coming up, she said calmly, where you explain exactly how you've been moving company funds through fake accounts. The DA found that very interesting. The color drained from Michael's face. You recorded us? That's illegal. Actually, I spoke up, sliding a document across the table. Here's the security system contract signed by you 6 months ago. See that clause you initialed? Full audio and video recording throughout the property. Lisa jumped to her feet, her designer purse clutched to her chest like a shield. This is ridiculous. The house transfer is legal. Is it? Sarah raised an eyebrow, pulling out another file. Let's talk about legal. Like how you both plan to flip the property and split the profits to hide embezzled money. Or how you forged Emma's signature on the preliminary documents. I never. Michael started, but Sarah held up her hand. The footage shows you practicing her signature, Michael. 3 different cameras caught that little practice session. Would you like to see those angles too? I watched them squirm, remembering all the times they'd made me feel small, insignificant, unworthy. Michael's constant criticism, Lisa's snide remarks about how lucky I was that her brother had settled for me. What do you want? Michael finally asked, his voice hoarse. The truth, I replied simply. Tell me why. Why try to take my home? Your home. Lisa scoffed, but there was fear behind her bravado. Michael paid for it. I pulled out one final document, my grandmother's trust fund statement. Actually, my inheritance provided the down payment and half the mortgage payments, another fact you both seemed to forget. Michael stared at the statement, his jaw clenching. That's impossible. You never had money of your own. No, I let you believe that because your ego needed it. Another mistake I won't repeat. Sarah cleared her throat. Here's what's going to happen. You're both going to sign these papers voiding the fraudulent property transfer. Then, Michael, you're going to come clean to your company about the embezzlement. And if we refuse, Lisa challenged. In response, Sarah pressed play on another video clip, this one showing Michael explaining in detail how he'd been stealing from his company for years, using Lisa's accounting firm to cover his tracks. The DA has copies of everything, I said quietly. Your choice if you want them to use it. Michael slumped in his chair, the fight draining from him. You planned this? All of it? No, I corrected him. You planned this. I just made sure there was evidence. The next hour was a blur of signatures and legal terms. By the time we finished, the fraudulent transfer was voided, and Michael had signed a confession for his company's legal team. Lisa stormed out, already on the phone with her own lawyer. As Michael stood to leave, he turned to me. I underestimated you. Yes, I agreed. You did. Once they were gone, Sarah turned to me. You okay? I looked down at my hands, surprised to find them steady. You know what's strange? I am. For the first time in years, I really am. The company's legal team will be in touch about the embezzlement, she said. Michael's looking at serious consequences. I nodded, gathering my things. I know. But that's his problem now. Walking out of Sarah's office, I felt lighter somehow. The home Michael had tried to steal was still mine. But more importantly, I finally found my voice. No more quiet acceptance, no more looking the other way. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. You've ruined everything. I hope you're happy. I smiled, typing back. Actually, I am. Enjoy your legal bills. The house keys felt different in my hand as I drove home. Not just pieces of metal, but symbols of something bigger. I protected what was mine, not through dramatics or manipulation, but through careful planning and quiet strength. Michael and Lisa had never bothered to look up to notice the cameras capturing their schemes. They'd been so convinced of their own cleverness, so certain of my weakness, that they'd never considered I might be smarter than they thought. As I pulled into my driveway, I thought about the changes ahead. Michael would face consequences for his embezzlement. Lisa's accounting firm would come under scrutiny, and I would finally live in my home on my own terms. The security cameras blinked their quiet red lights as I entered, faithful witnesses to the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. It's simply letting people face the consequences of their own actions. 6 months after that day in Sarah's office, I stood in my newly renovated kitchen, sipping coffee. The morning sun streamed through the windows, filling the space with warmth. The house no longer reminded me of Michael. Every trace of him was gone, replaced with colors and textures that made me feel safe and at peace. The news had been big at first. Local executive caught in fraud, and siblings involved in property scam. Michael admitted his crimes and took a deal, which meant jail time and paying back what he had stolen. Lisa lost her job too, her firm wanting nothing to do with the scandal. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Michael's sentencing is next week. Want me to come? No, I replied. That chapter is closed. And it was. The house was legally mine, and I had used my grandmother's trust fund to renovate it, removing every painful memory. The security cameras stayed, though silent protectors that made me feel safe again. The doorbell rang. I checked the security feed on my phone. It was Lisa. She looked different, tired, worn down. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. What do you want, Lisa? I came to apologize, she said, her voice softer than before. What we did was wrong. I studied her face. Why now? Because I lost everything, she admitted. My job, my reputation. And it made me realize we didn't just try to take your house. We tried to take your peace. I thought of all the nights I had watched them scheme against me in my own home. You both thought I was weak. Lisa shook her head. We were wrong. I see that now. I nodded, accepting her apology but not offering forgiveness. Some things can't be undone. Goodbye, Lisa. As I closed the door, I felt lighter. I didn't need their regret. I had something better, self-respect, and a home that was truly mine. That evening, I hosted a small dinner party, something I had never done before. Sarah was there, along with new friends from my book club. The house was filled with laughter, the kind that came from happiness, not manipulation. Sarah raised her glass. To new beginnings, and to security cameras. Everyone laughed. They didn't know the full story, and they didn't need to. Success isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet strength, knowing when to be patient and when to act. After my guests left, I walked through my home, touching the walls that now held new memories. The security cameras blinked, not just as protection, but as reminders. I had been smart, I had been strong, and I had won. Michael's sentencing would happen without me. Liz's apology wouldn't change the past. But I had something better than revenge. I had peace. I pulled out a photo of my grandmother and whispered, "You were right. Sometimes the quiet ones are the strongest." The house creaked softly, but it wasn't lonely anymore. It was comforting. This was my home, built on courage and protected by wisdom. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Sarah. "Are you sure you don't want to go to the sentencing?" I looked around at the life I had rebuilt and typed back, "No need. I'm exactly where I want to be." And I was. Happy endings don't always look like we expect. Sometimes they look like quiet triumph, a home that feels safe, and a woman who learned to stand her ground. "Your sister deserves this vacation more than we need a baby." My husband's voice crackled through the phone, attempting to sound confident but betraying a hint of nervousness. "I've already transferred our IVF savings to her account." I stood in our kitchen, my hand gripping the counter as I processed his words. The $45,000 we'd spent 3 years saving, the money that represented our hopes and dreams of starting a family, gone. Given to his sister Emma for a luxury European vacation. "Perfect," I replied, my voice steady. "Thanks for letting me know." There was a pause on the other end. This wasn't the reaction David had expected. He'd been prepared for tears, for anger, for the emotional outburst he'd grown accustomed to dismissing as my baby fever. Instead, he got calm acceptance. "Look, Olivia," he started, his tone shifting to the condescending one he perfected over our 8 years of marriage. "Emma's been through a rough divorce. She needs this break. We can always save up again for the IVF. You're only 34, there's plenty of time." I looked down at the papers on the counter in front of me, documents I'd received just 2 weeks ago from my doctor. Papers that would have shattered David's convenient narrative about plenty of time. Papers that made his betrayal even more devastating. "You're right," I said, surprising myself with how easily the lie came. "Emma deserves this. I hope she has a wonderful time." "Really?" David sounded suspicious now. "That's it. No argument?" "No argument," I confirmed. "I need to go. I'm running late for my shift at the hospital." I hung up before he could respond, before the trembling in my hands could reach my voice. As a pediatric nurse, I learned to keep my composure in crisis situations. Right now, that training was the only thing keeping me together. 2 weeks ago, my doctor had called me in for a private consultation. The results of my latest fertility tests showed that my condition was deteriorating rapidly. If we wanted to conceive through IVF, we needed to act within the next 3 months. After that, my chances would drop dramatically. I hadn't told David yet. I'd been waiting for the right moment, gathering resources, and making plans. Now I realized I'd been right to keep it to myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "OMG sis. David told me what he did. You're the best for understanding. Can't wait to post pics from Paris. Love you." I stared at the message, remembering all the times Emma had competed with me for David's attention and resources. The emergencies that always seemed to coincide with our important moments. The way she talked David out of our previous IVF attempt 2 years ago because she needed help with her down payment. Family comes first, she'd insisted, while David nodded along. My hands stopped shaking. A strange calm settled over me as pieces clicked into place. All those years of playing second fiddle to Emma's needs, of watching David prioritize his sister's whims over our future, they'd been leading to this moment. I opened my laptop and logged into our joint account. As expected, David had cleaned it out. All our careful saving, the extra shifts I picked up, the bonuses I contributed, transferred to Emma's account that morning. What David didn't know was that I'd seen this coming. 6 months ago, after Emma's divorce, I'd watched her eyeing our savings with that familiar calculating look. I'd started preparing then, opening a separate account at a different bank. Every extra shift, every bonus for the past 6 months had gone there instead of our joint account. I even sold some of my jewelry, pieces David had never noticed anyway. The joint account he'd emptied, it contained exactly what I'd calculated Emma might convince him to take. The real IVF fund was safe, along with something else David had forgotten about, proof of every penny I contributed to our joint savings, documented meticulously over the years. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Dr. Torres, my fertility specialist. Appointment confirmed for next week. All paperwork ready as discussed. I took a deep breath and began gathering what I needed. 8 years of marriage had taught me a lot about David and Emma's pattern of behavior. Now it was time to put that knowledge to use. As I prepared for my shift at the hospital, I thought about all the times David had dismissed my concerns about his sister's influence. "You're being paranoid," he'd say. "Emma's family." Well, he was right about one thing. Family does come first. As I walked through the hospital corridors during my shift, memories of the past 8 years played through my mind like a movie reel. Each scene revealed a pattern I'd been too loyal, too trusting to acknowledge. The time David postponed our honeymoon because Emma had a crisis with her then-husband. The anniversary he missed because Emma needed help moving. Every milestone in our marriage seemed to have Emma's shadow looming over it. Olivia. Sarah, my colleague at the pediatric ward, called out, "Everything okay? You seem distracted." I managed a small smile. David gave our IVF savings to Emma for her vacation fund. Sarah's face went through a range of emotions: shock, anger, and finally, understanding. She was one of the few people who knew about my separate account and my contingency plans. "So it finally happened," she said quietly, pulling me into the break room. "What are you going to do?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the email I'd received that morning from my lawyer. "Remember Jake Harrison, the attorney whose daughter I helped through chemo last year?" Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning the email. "He's agreed to take your case. Pro bono," I confirmed. "He says given the documentation I have, plus David's latest stunt, we have a strong case for financial misconduct during marriage." "Does David know you've been documenting everything?" I shook my head. He never paid attention to the financial stuff. Too busy managing Emma's life to notice what was happening in his own home. My phone buzzed with another text from Emma. "Just booked first-class tickets. This is going to be amazing. Thanks again for being so understanding." Sarah read the message over my shoulder and scoffed. "She's really rubbing it in, isn't she?" "Let her," I replied, my voice steady. "Every message, every post, every font is just more evidence." During my lunch break, I called Dr. Torres to confirm the details of our plan. As one of the top fertility specialists in the state, she had connections with several clinics that offered financing options. Between my separate savings and their program, we could proceed with the IVF as planned. "Are you sure you want to do this alone?" she asked gently. "I'm sure," I replied. "I've spent 8 years waiting for David to choose our family over his sister's demands. I'm done waiting." When I got home that evening, David was waiting. He had that familiar look, the one that meant Emma had convinced him he was right and I was being unreasonable. "Emma's so excited about the trip," he started, as if we were discussing something as trivial as dinner plans. "She's already planned the whole itinerary. Paris, Rome, Barcelona." "Sounds wonderful," I said, heading to the kitchen to start dinner. "I'm sure she'll have an amazing time." He followed me, thrown off by my continued calm. "Look, I know you're probably upset deep down, but Emma needs this. After everything with her ex-husband." "David," I interrupted, turning to face him. "I said it was fine. What more do you want from me?" He stood there, mouth slightly open, clearly unprepared for this version of me. The version that wasn't begging for explanations or fighting for his attention. I just want you to understand," he stammered. "I understand perfectly," I replied, my voice level. "Now I have an early shift tomorrow, so I'm going to head to bed early." As I lay in bed that night, listening to David watching TV downstairs, I thought about the appointment scheduled with Jake Harrison for tomorrow. About the file of evidence I collected over the years. About the IVF procedure scheduled for next month. David had made his choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. My phone lit up with one last text from Emma. "Just bought the cutest outfits for my trip. Can't wait to post all the pics. You're seriously the best sister-in-law ever." I smiled in the darkness, thinking about how different things would look in just a few weeks. Emma had no idea she was documenting her own downfall, one gleeful post at a time. Tomorrow would be the first step toward my new future. With or without David, I was going to have the family I always dreamed of. And no one, not even his precious sister, would stand in my way this time. The next morning, I met with Jake Harrison in his office downtown. The space was warm and professional, much like Jake himself. He spread out the documents I provided on his mahogany desk, nodding as he reviewed them. "This is thorough," he said, picking up the detailed record of my contributions to the joint account. "Most people don't think to document everything so carefully." 8 years of watching my savings disappear into Emma's emergencies taught me to keep receipts, I replied. Jake leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "The transfer to Emma's account yesterday, that's what we call the smoking gun. It shows a clear pattern of financial misconduct and misuse of marital assets." I pulled out my phone, showing him Emma's latest social media posts. Designer shopping sprees, first-class ticket confirmations, luxury hotel bookings, all paid for with our IVF fund. "She's not exactly being subtle about it," Jake observed, taking screenshots. "This actually works in our favor. Have you told David about your medical situation?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I wanted to secure my position first." "Smart," he nodded. "Given the time-sensitive nature of your condition and the fact that he gave away funds specifically saved for medical treatment, we can request an emergency hearing." As Jake outlined our strategy, my phone buzzed with a text from David. "Emma's so happy. I knew you'd understand once you had time to think about it. You're amazing, babe." I showed the message to Jake, who added it to our growing file. "He's building our case for us," he mused. "Does he have any idea you're here?" "No," I replied. "He thinks I'm at work. I took a personal day." "Good. I'd like to file everything today. The sooner we move, the better our position." Jake gathered the papers into a folder. "Are you ready for what comes next? Once we file, there's no going back." I thought about the years of putting my dreams on hold, of watching David consistently choose his sister's wants over our needs. "I'm ready." That afternoon, while David was at work, I went to the bank and closed our joint credit cards. Jake had advised me to protect myself financially before the paperwork was served. I also withdrew my portion of our remaining joint savings, a measly $3,000 that Emma hadn't managed to convince David to share. When I got home, there was a package waiting on the doorstep. Inside was a framed photo of Emma with a note. "For your living room, so you can see how amazing the money was spent. Love you." The audacity might have hurt once. Now it just strengthened my resolve. I was preparing dinner when David came home, whistling. He stopped short when he saw me calmly setting the table for one. "Where's my plate?" he asked, confusion evident in his voice. "I think you should eat at Emma's tonight," I replied evenly. "She'll probably want to show you all her new purchases." Are you angry?" He seemed genuinely puzzled. "I thought you were okay with this." "I'm not angry, David. I'm done." I placed a manila envelope on the table. "You've been served." His face went from confusion to shock as he opened the envelope. "Divorce papers? This is ridiculous. All this over Emma's vacation?" "No," I said quietly. "This is about 8 years of watching you choose your sister over our marriage. The vacation fund was just the final straw." "You're overreacting," he sputtered. "We can save up again for the IVF." "Actually, we can't." I handed him the medical documents I'd been keeping to myself. "I needed that treatment within the next 3 months. But don't worry, I'm still getting it. Just not with you." The color draining from his face as he read the doctor's report. "Why didn't you tell me? Would it have mattered?" I asked. "Would you have said no to Emma?" His silence was all the answer I needed. "I have an IVF appointment next month," I told him. "I'm doing it on my own, with my own money you and Emma can't touch. I suggest you start looking for a place to stay. Your sister has plenty of room, I hear." "Olivia, please," he started, but I cut him off. "Check your credit cards before you leave. They're closed. And don't bother checking the joint account. I've withdrawn my portion. You can keep the rest, though I suspect Emma's already got plans for it." As David stood there, stunned and speechless, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. 8 years of compromising, of coming second, of watching my dreams slip away. It was finally over. and my new beginning was just around the corner. 2 months later, I sat in Dr. Torres' office, staring at the ultrasound screen with tears in my eyes. Against all odds, the first round of IVF had been successful. I was pregnant. Congratulations, Dr. Torres smiled warmly. Your numbers look excellent. I'd say all that careful planning paid off. As I left the clinic clutching my ultrasound photos, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my lawyer. Final divorce hearing scheduled for next week. Emma's vacation posts have been invaluable evidence. Emma's European adventure had turned into a social media spectacle. Designer shopping sprees, luxury hotels, champagne-soaked yacht parties, all meticulously documented on Instagram. Each post had been carefully added to our court documentation, proving exactly where our IVF savings had gone. David's attempts to justify the situation had grown increasingly desperate. Emma needed this break, he'd argued during mediation. It was a mental health necessity. The mediator had been unimpressed, especially when presented with Emma's social media feed. Mental health necessity? She questioned, looking at photos of Emma partying in St. Tropez. This looks more like reckless spending of marital assets. I pulled into my new apartment complex, a cozy place closer to the hospital where I worked. Sarah was waiting outside with a care package. Well, she asked eagerly as I approached. Wordlessly, I handed her the ultrasound photo. Her squeal of delight echoed across the parking lot. I'm going to be an aunt, she exclaimed, hugging me tight. Have you told anyone else yet? Just you, I replied. I'm waiting until after the divorce is finalized next week. Inside over tea, Sarah updated me on the latest gossip. Emma had returned from Europe to find her own financial situation in shambles. The vacation had burned through not just our IVF money, but her own savings as well. She tried to hit David up for more money, Sarah reported. But apparently his accounts are all frozen pending the divorce settlement. I sipped my tea, thinking about the irony. How did he respond? From what I heard, he finally said no to her. First time for everything, I guess. The day of the final hearing arrived bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a conservative navy suit, the slight swell of my pregnancy still barely visible beneath the jacket. David and Emma were both there, looking considerably less polished than in their recent social media posts. Emma's designer vacation wardrobe couldn't hide the panic in her eyes as our lawyer presented the financial evidence. The judge was particularly interested in the timing, how the money had been taken just when it was most crucial for medical treatment. Mr. Mitchell, she addressed David, you deliberately misappropriated funds that were saved for time-sensitive medical treatment, giving them to your sister for a luxury vacation. Do you understand the severity of this action? David's response was quiet. I didn't know about the time sensitivity. Because you never asked, I interjected softly. You never asked about anything that didn't involve Emma. The judge's ruling was decisive. Given the documented financial misconduct and the medical circumstances, I was awarded a significant portion of our assets. Emma was ordered to repay her portion of the misappropriated funds, though we all knew that was unlikely to happen. As we left the courthouse, David tried to approach me one last time. Olivia, he called out. I'm sorry. I know now what I did was wrong. Maybe we could. I turned to face him, my hand instinctively resting on my stomach. His eyes widened as he noticed the gesture, realization dawning on his face. You're? Yes, I said simply. I am, and this baby will grow up knowing that they were wanted, planned for, and chosen first. Always. I walked away without looking back, leaving David standing there with Emma, who was already complaining about the repayment order. 6 months later, as I sat in my newly decorated nursery, I received a final text from David. I understand now what I lost. I hope you and the baby have the life you deserve. I looked around the peaceful room at the life I built for myself and my growing baby and smiled. We already did. Sarah brought over dinner that evening, and as we sat talking about the future, about baby names and nursery colors and all the joy ahead, I felt complete. The path hadn't been what I expected, but it had led me exactly where I needed to be. My hand rested on my growing belly, feeling the baby kick. We're going to be just fine, little one, I whispered. Just fine indeed. And we were.